From the News Channel 5 Network, this is MorningLine.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us on MorningLine. Nick Beres here on a Monday. Hope you had a nice weekend, and I thank you so much for joining us today as we get your week off to a good start. And we've got a great show as always. This morning we're going to be talking, law enforcement. We're going to talk about jails. But really what I want to get into, and we're going to take your calls, and you're welcome to guide us in the conversation with our guest, the art of the escape, or the prevention in the art of the escape from a prison or a jail, because there have been some very high-profile escapes of late, not locally, but nationally and internationally, and it's just fascinating to me how these things go down and how it occurs and all of that. And certainly anyone who's in law enforcement running a jail or a prison has to be aware of this kind of stuff. We're going to get into that and other items at your discretion with our guest, Davidson County Sheriff Daron Hall. Good morning to you.
Good morning, Nick. How are you?
Yeah, it's good to have you on. It's good to have you on. You know, it's interesting. We sit down before the show and talk about different things going on. And like I said, we'll open up the phone line 737-7587. But we went right to the recent escapes. You know, you have El Chapo in Mexico, and I want to talk a little bit about some of that crazy escape. And you've seen the video of the tunnel, and then the escape in New York, as you called it last time you were on. Those two that escaped would be caught separately. What was it made you think that?
Yeah, and to be honest with you, I mean, if you think about that, I watched another series over the weekend about that one. But, you know, it's very difficult to stay together. Most escapes that are more successful, once they get out, they split up. It's easier to find two people than one and all that. These guys, it sounds like, stayed together longer than I would have expected.
I was surprised.
Me too. Yeah. And the one, I forget the names here, but the one who was living, continues to say that the other one was dragging him down and holding him back and all that. And I just think, and I'm glad because they were able to catch both of them now, of course. But yeah, I mean, normally you get away. If you stay together, you really aren't as friendly as, you know, just because you're cellmates or whatever. And once you get out, you have different interests, different places, different relationships, and it's harder to hide two people than one. And so the more likely scenario is that they split up. These people, I think, didn't split up until much later. And I forget the one that is still alive, but he was kind of moving faster, wanting to move in different directions. And,
right. He's close to getting to Canada, even though everyone talks about he was just a couple miles from the border. I don't know that if he went across the border, he would, the Mounties would have been all over him.
That's right.
You know, so it's not like he was going to escape there. I mean,
I think that, to be honest with you, I think we're very lucky. I mean, those hunting lodges and food and weapons and all the stuff that's in there, and you could live there for move houses if you wanted to in that time of year. So yeah, it's almost the perfect place to go hide. Versus, I don't think moving to Canada would have been a really good idea.
Big idea.
I always think about hopping a train and riding into another state where you could find yourself and get away from the intensity of it. But there was some luck. It's always luck too, good and bad luck that falls. And I think was able to find the DNA in one of the cabins fairly quickly. I think the one that was shot and killed was kind of the slower of the two and was dragging.
When they found him, he had some health problems. He was covered with bug bites. He'd been drinking. I mean, I think he just kind of was probably slowing the other guy down. Now they caught those guys, and I think we all agreed that it was just a matter of time before those two would get caught. I'm going to tell you right now, unless he completely screws up El Chapo down in Mexico, he's home free. Because now the key are resources, and clearly this guy's a bazillionaire, and he gets out, and you've seen it again, the amazing video of the tunnel going down, and you tell me that you've had some of your staff actually go down to Mexico to consult with their prison system there, not with this specific one, but they're trying to make headway. But that was incredibly embarrassing. And again, there's absolutely in your mind zero doubt in anyone's mind that El Chapo paid off a ton of people to get them to be able to drill right up into his shower stall and escape. I mean, half the prison had to be on the payroll.
I'm not so sure we could do that in our own jails with all the resources above the law, above the rules, meaning just get everybody. I don't know how difficult that would really be to do. And again, I'm not a mechanical engineer, but you just take all that, it's still pretty tough to make all that line up. But yeah, you're talking about resources, you're talking about a lot of things that go into it, and it wouldn't surprise me when it's all said and done that his money and his influence was able to get the actual drawings and plans and understand the entire prison itself and know exactly where to come up.
So you had the blueprints, because that's what's amazing to me is that they were able to be that specific, tunneling up right, how do they know that? They're going right up into his cell and he gets away. And this to me is an example. I know they're trying, and I want to have you talk a bit more about how your staff has gone down to consult with them, but I mean, with an inmate of his profile, I think the U.S. was trying to get him to be brought here to be incarcerated, where he would still be today. It wouldn't work. But Mexican authorities said that he's an our inmate, we've caught him, we're going to keep him, and what we all feared was going to happen happened.
Yeah, I mean, this country, I can't imagine what the outcry would be if we had, I don't know of a figure of anywhere near his level in this country that everyone in the United States wouldn't understand and know. But, you know, Saddam Hussein is the equivalent in some people's minds. But you're talking about the most notorious person incarcerated, and you know, not because you can't handle it, but sometimes because of those influences, moving him to another place would have saved the embarrassment of the facility, the government, everyone else.
What were they thinking? Maybe politically it was important. I mean, we're talking about a guy here that they say is responsible for maybe 25% of the drugs in this country. Right. I mean, money to him is like water.
Right.
Okay. I mean, if he's responsible for that much drugs into the United States, much less who knows where else. I mean, when you have that much money, you can buy your way out of just about anything, and maybe even in this country. But I mean, you'd have to be in some like supermax facility and moved around, and we have inmates that are high profile and have money, but nothing like this guy.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's it. I mean, the other part is once they get out, I mean, if you continue the life of crime, street crime or whatever, you had to steal cars or get away, with that, you're going to get caught. I mean, you just can't keep doing it. This guy's crime life is way above the street, and so he's not going to be on the street being arrested by anyone. And so to recapture him, given the circumstances that there are in Mexico, to me is very unlikely, at least in the near future. And he can afford to do a lot of things to his body and everything else that you and I probably wouldn't recognize. But I think, again, I don't think he can change the life he has. I think he will be, you know, I think it was being done from prison, where he was organizing and orchestrating that whole system. I mean, it's, and again, there's so much, there have been improvements in Mexico. The State Department from the United States and the American Correctional Association has been down in Mexico for the last 5 to 6 years, really trying to see several of the prisons there. We call them state prisons in this country, but very similar to theirs that have been really, really dangerous, really bad. I mean, there's some really amazing stories about, I can't imagine this in this country, but just a handful of years ago, there were inmates inside the prisons with guns, and people would be shot. Other inmates would be shot by inmates while they're out on the rec yard, and then and their murders were never solved.
Nothing solved.
The point is, there's something, and they've moved really, I think, in the right direction as it relates to some of that, and tried to make steps. Our chief deputy here has been down to Mexico, I guess 2 or 3 times, doing audits for the American Correctional Association, and I was the president of the association when they were first accredited. They have 3 of their prisons now accredited down there, and not this particular one. And but it's making strides. You know that there's corruption issues in law enforcement down there. There's corruption issues in government, and I think they're trying to make some headway. And it's unfortunate, the embarrassment of this situation, and just the way it all looks. And I'm sure there's a lot to be said. I haven't followed it last week or so, but I know there's some other arrests now of staff members. Haven't heard what their involvement's going to be.
At least 3 more, you know, and who knows what else will come. But you're right, the inside help, there's just no question. No question. Well, let's take a few calls before we go to the break, and you know, I'm just fascinated by that. We can talk about, you know, his take as well on, you know, making sure as far as escapes from county jails, and also we'll get into some of these lockdowns at state prisons here as well. Again, you were over a jail, not a prison, but you've had to lock down before. Let's go to real quickly, Paul. Paul, good morning.
Hey, good morning, Nick. How you doing?
Good, Paul. What's on your mind?
Good morning, Sheriff. How you doing, sir?
I'm great, Paul. How you doing?
I'm doing good, buddy. Well, I just listened to you talk about ACA. Lord, I remember that, Sheriff. I worked for CCA for 14 years. I was a unit manager over segregation and a captain for CCA for that amount of time. I remember those good old ACA audits we used to get. Anyway, what I was going to tell you was, Nick, I'd make my comment pretty short. You have on your show today, and I said it last time he was there, you have one of the best public servants and one of the finest fellas in Nashville, Davidson County that this county's ever had, and I hope he has a long career and many more years. And that's my comment, Nick, and thank you, buddy.
Hey, thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Very nice.
That's nice.
I'm anytime you have that in this
You're humbled. You're humbled.
I'm humbled. That feels very nice.
That's nice. Paul's a good friend. All right, let's go to Joe. Joe, good morning.
Good morning, Nick.
Hey, Joe.
I'll just echo what Paul just said about the sheriff. But the question I've got is this fiasco with the jail. When are they going to get started on this rebuild? And the other, I mean, this is a joke to begin with, but the other comment I'll make is our prison system in the state of Tennessee is so short-staffed that they are working guards sometimes two double 12-hour shifts because they don't have enough employees, and they're so lowly paid that they can't keep employees, and they're working these guys to death. We're going to have more problems in the state of Tennessee in our prisons.
Yeah, hey, listen, thank you for that. A couple of hits there. Let's hit that one first, because I think there's two state prisons that were on lockdown, Northeast and Northwest, I think. And it was a situation, I think, in one of them where there were a couple of inmates that rioted, and then there were stabbings. I don't think any guards were seriously hurt, but part of the reason was that in one place they thought there was a shortage of guards, or there wasn't enough supervision, something along those lines.
Yeah, I read a little bit about it. I'm familiar with some of that. It's not unusual to lock down another facility because you're having problems in one. Some of that could be whether it's information going back and forth. A lot of times you get information that says that they're all going to try to do something at the same time. So that didn't totally surprise me that they were going to go in and lock down. It's probably a smart thing in case it got worse. You could move some officers to the facility that needed it. But yeah, I think the Department of Corrections is going through several things here. I'm very familiar with what's going on, and it's kind of down in the weeds, but there's an issue where they're moving them to a 28-day work cycle. We've been on that for 20 years. It's something I'm very familiar with, and it's legally acceptable. It's the right thing to do as a management function. It basically means you work 28 days a month instead of a 40-hour work week. The federal government allows you to do that in law enforcement. Police, EMTs, fire, nurses, and corrections usually are the ones that are doing it. They've just been very behind in ever trying to move to that system. We did it 20 years ago. It really allows you to have flexible work schedules because of the difficult line of work. But when you do that, it does upset some of the staff who have been used to 40 hours, and I think some of that's what's going on. And Joe's right. I've been on this show years ago, and I'll say it forever. I think correctional officers are the most underpaid in government. It doesn't matter. I love teachers. I love all these other folks that have arguments. This is the line of work I know. Sometimes you're going to get what you pay for. If you don't, folks that are doing very difficult jobs, very thankless positions. If you look at the life expectancy and the divorce rates and suicide rates and all the things that go into it, it's a very, very difficult, stressful
job. Have you hired some correctional officers from the state to work at the jail? Nick, do they come over?
I was going to. We hired. We have a class in right now. It's a 6-week-long deal. They've been here probably 3 weeks, and I go over there first morning, welcome them to. One of the things I always ask is, and we have 39, I think, in class. One of the things I always ask is just talk about how many of you have corrections backgrounds and that type of thing. And usually I'll say how many have worked here or there. I could be wrong, but this was probably the largest number of Department of Corrections people I've ever seen in our numbers. We do pay better.
That's what I was going to ask.
Our benefits, I think, are better, but that's not changed. And so the point is, that's always been the case. And so for me to walk in, and I'm going to guess maybe 2/3 of them had Department of Corrections backgrounds. I didn't go any further than that, but I remember saying that morning, wow, and just talking a little bit more about it. But it's, the state of Tennessee did give them raises a few years ago. I was glad to see that. I actually was, I believe a few years back, was asked to come and testify in front of a committee or two about, the pay and why they need to raise it over there. And it's just something that needs to happen. And Joe mentions that he's right. They're low on staff. They're low on some things. They're trying to raise the pay. I'm on the Department of Corrections side about the work schedules. We've been doing that forever. The Metro Police do it here. The fire do it here. It's nothing that's against or outside the norm. It's just been late in happening over there. But so that's one thing. The other thing, and I do think our government needs to realize what you're trying to ask people to do. The jobs are tough. They're dangerous. The stuff that you're seeing in Mexico and these other places, the temptations are going to be there, and you need to be able to hire people and qualify people and train people.
They won't be susceptible to that if they're
right.
Well, listen, let's take a break on that note. We can talk more about that. We'll take some phone calls as well. Taylor, if you're on hold, and others, stay there. We'll get to your phone calls when we come back. But yeah, so many people these days, many of our viewers, they watch a lot of the stories we do on crime, like, yeah, lock them up, put them away. That's fine. So many of you are so quick to do that, and I'm not saying some of these people don't deserve it, but you know what? You've got to pay to incarcerate them, and no one wants to do it. The budget's being cut, and it's happening with the prisons, and you see what goes down. You want to lock them up, you got to pay for it. We'll be back with more right after this. That's the thing that drives me crazy.